In the summer of 1808, Napoleon Bonaparte was at the height of his power. He had humiliated the great armies of Europe. Prussia had fallen, Austria had been broken, Russia had made peace, and now his brother sat on the throne of Spain, whether Spain wanted him there or not. Most of Spain did not. What followed was not a conventional war. It was something messier, uglier, and ultimately more costly for the French Empire than almost anything that came before it. The Spanish called it La Guerra de la Independencia. The rest of history would come to call it the Peninsular War, and Napoleon himself would one day call it his Spanish ulcer, a wound that never healed. The city of Zaragoza in northeastern Spain became the open wounds center. Zaragoza was not a great military fortress. It had no massive garrison, no elite professional troops waiting behind its walls. What it had was people, and those people had decided, almost collectively, that they would not surrender. When French General Lefebvre arrived in June of 1808 with 6,000 soldiers, he expected the city to yield within days. Cities always yielded. That was how war worked. But the people of Zaragoza had not read the same books as General Lefebvre. They fought from rooftops, they fought from church towers, they fought from behind overturned carts and broken furniture piled into alleyways. Priests stood alongside farmers. Women carried ammunition and food to the men at the walls. Children ran messages through streets that were slowly being turned to rubble by French artillery. The city held. Among those civilians was a young woman named Agustina Zaragoza Dominic. She was 22 years old, born in Catalonia, married to a soldier in the Spanish artillery. In another life, in almost any other life, her story would have been invisible to history. A woman who kept the household, worried about her husband, survived whatever came. But history had other plans. On the morning of June 15, 1808, Agustina was doing what many civilian women had taken to doing during the siege, moving through the city's defensive lines, bringing food and water to the exhausted gunners manning the artillery positions. It was dangerous, unglamorous work, the kind of work that makes battles possible but never makes it into the history books. She was approaching the Portillo Gate, one of the most contested points in the city's defenses, when the French launched a new assault. What she found at the Portillo Gate stopped her. The cannon crew was down, every man, dead, wounded, or retreating in the face of the French advance. The guns sat silent, loaded and ready, a single lit fuse nearby. And through the gate, French soldiers were pushing forward. In that moment, the defense of the entire sector hung on a thread. This is the moment that separates the history we read from the history we live. There is no dramatic music, there is no slow motion. There is only a split second in which a person sees what needs to be done and decides, in spite of every instinct for self-preservation, to do it. Agustina stepped over the bodies of the fallen men, picked up the fuse, and fired the cannon. The blast tore into the advancing French column and stopped them cold. But more important than what the cannon did physically was what it did to every Spanish defender watching. The sight of a young civilian woman standing over fallen soldiers, standing at the cannon, standing her ground, ripped through the fear and exhaustion of the entire defense like a current. Men who had been falling back steadied themselves. Others rushed forward to join her at the gun. The French assault faltered, then failed. Zaragoza held again. The story spread within the city within hours. It spread through Spain within weeks. A woman at the Portillo Gate had refused to let the cannon fall silent. The name Agustina de Aragon, of Aragon, the region she had come to represent, entered the language almost immediately. Francisco Goya heard the story. He was Spain's greatest living painter and a deeply political man who was already documenting the horrors of the French invasion in a series of etchings that would become Los Desastres de la Guerra, the disasters of war. One of those etchings shows a woman at the cannon, standing over fallen men, smoke rising around her. He titled it simply, "What Courage." He had it right. The English poet Lord Byron would later write her into Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, calling her the Maid of Zaragoza, comparing her explicitly to Joan of Arc. Her image circulated across the resistance movements of Europe as something rare in that era, a real woman named and documented who had changed the course of a battle by herself.
But Zaragoza's story was not over, and neither was Agustina's. The French came back. In December of 1808, with Napoleon himself briefly directing the campaign, a far larger French force, over 40,000 men, besieged the city a second time. This siege was different. It was systematic, relentless, and savage. The French did not just bombard the walls, they methodically destroyed the city block by block, building by building, room by room. Defenders fought hand to hand through the rubble of their own homes. Disease tore through the population. Thousands died, not from bullets, but from typhus, starvation, cold. Agustina did not leave. She served through the second siege as a fully recognized artillery officer, a formal military rank, almost unheard of for a woman in that era, operating cannons, training others, refusing to yield even as the city crumbled around her. When Zaragoza finally fell in February 1809, she was captured. She escaped French captivity, made her way to the remaining Spanish resistance forces, continued to serve. She fought in the guerrilla campaigns that followed. She was at the Battle of Vitoria in 1813, one of the engagements that finally drove the French from Spain. By the war's end, she held the rank of captain, drew a formal military pension, and had been decorated by the Spanish government. She lived to the age of 71, dying in 1857, long enough to see Spain transformed by the very war she had helped spark into something fiercer. History has a way of reducing people to their single greatest moment, the image on the stamp, the line in the poem, the painting on the wall. For Agustina de Aragon, that moment is always the cannon, the fuse in her hand, the French column stopped cold. But the cannon was not the whole story. It was only the beginning of one. What she did on that morning at the Portillo Gate was not a one-time eruption of emotion. It was the first visible expression of something that ran all the way through her, a refusal, deep and consistent, to accept what she was told to accept. She kept making that choice, through the second siege, through captivity, through years of guerrilla fighting, through a world that had never made space for what she was. Napoleon took half of Europe. He did not take Zaragoza without a fight. And the person most responsible for that fight being remembered, for the resistance of an entire city finding a face and a name, was a 22-year-old woman with a fuse in her hand and not a single reason to stop, except that she wasn't built that way.